he no longer had the will to live. The magic god Ophinus had stolen everything from him. She had brought happiness to the 6 billion people on Earth without him even existing. The boy could not bear that the people he knew no longer remembered him. He stood at the edge of the building, ready to take the final step to his death. This is the story that broke Kamijou Touma's heart. Magic god Ophinus had destroyed the world Kamijou Touma knew, and trapped him in nothingness because of his special right hand, Imagine Breaker. It could destroy almost any supernatural power, even miracles and fate itself, acting as the reference point of the entire world. It was the one lifeline Touma had to returning back to his reality, but Ophinus wanted to use it for herself, in order to restore her own world that had been lost and forgotten. As killing Touma would be a pain, as the Magic Breaker will be lost and may reappear at any point in history. Therefore, she did what all deranged blonde gender-bent Odin witch god dom mommies do: mentally destroy a twinkie Asian teenager. Ophinus exposed Touma to many different phases or layers of reality, overlapping the universe, where she could basically change and do whatever she wanted. She could warp the minds of the world's population by changing their perspective via her magic. She could even bring the dead back to life, alter concepts and laws, and bring about a completely different world in an instant. The title of Magic God isn't a joke. The first world, known as the Alpha Phase, made everyone believe that Touma was a wanted terrorist, with him essentially being on FBI's Most Wanted. His parents disowned him on worldwide news, and his classmates, including Aogami and Fukuyose, tried to kill him. Even his lolly teacher joined in and unexpectedly stabbed him with a knife. While it all sounds a bit silly, this had a profound impact on Touma. He had no idea what was going on as he was being hunted down and was in utter shock at how his family and friends were treating him. And yet, it wasn't enough to break him mentally. The purpose of this phase was to show that no one actually saw Touma for who he was. All Ophinus did was alter their perspective, and yet everyone went against him without trying to understand who he is inside. Ironically, this is exactly how Ophinus feels about herself, as she was judged by others and treated as a wanted criminal. She also suggests that everyone Touma knows does the exact same thing in his world, meaning they all think they understand Touma due to his actions and conduct of being the hero and helping others without taking the time to truly understand who he is inside. And to be fair to Ophinus, she does have a point. Touma lost his memory and no longer remembered who he truly was, forcing him to forge his own identity of what he saw as the best person possible who could help those in need. The countless people he saved, mostly girls, can't truly comprehend the enigma that is Kamijou Touma, or at least the new person he is now, since Touma is essentially a brand new person, merely an identity he created himself after his memories were destroyed. So how could anyone else, even his family and friends, truly relate to that? Ophinus then shifted the world to the beta phase, forcing Touma to witness another person replace him without being able to act. This imposter was called Kamijou Touma, and yet looked nothing like him, except this wasn't really a fake version of him, as this was the real Touma, in this dimension at least. His classmates treated him like normal, with the typical silly antics with his idiotic perverted best friends, Aogami and Tsuchimikado Motoharu. Then he attempted to reason with Index, the gluttonous non-roommate of his, about food. Next, he fell into an awkward situation with the Kamikawa sisters, and lastly, being threatened to be blown into space by his tsundere friend Misuka Mikoto. All of it was the typical misfortune-ridden interactions that Touma would deal on a daily basis, and yet the Touma we are familiar with was nothing more than an NPC in the back of the class, watching another dude steal a title of main character from him. This was created by Ophinus to prove that Touma's relationships and identity are entirely superficial. The only reason why he was able to gather such connections is because he can save others, when anyone else could have achieved the same result. This has an even deeper meaning, as Touma forged his own identity of who Kamijou Touma was after losing his memories of his past self, meaning anyone could construct the same personality of who he is meant to be, effectively making them Touma. Literally, anyone can have his identity and be Touma, according to Office, if you gaslight yourself hard enough. However, our Touma rejects the idea that he can't coexist with the other version of him. Just because this world's version of him created new bonds with his friends and loved ones, doesn't mean that our Touma can't just start again and build relationships from scratch. Office then showed him a photograph, telling him to pick out who he was amongst the classmates. But Touma was unable to recognize the faces he saw. This was all altered by Office in order to trick Touma into believing he was someone else, by essentially destroying the concept of Touma's identity inside his brain. Jesus, this is some crazy ass brainwashing. But he didn't pick out anyone and simply exclaimed, "He is Kamijou Touma," saying Office could create whatever false evidence she wanted to screw with his head. Disappointed by this result, Office then punished him with the most horrendous things that you couldn't even possibly imagine. The magic god subjugated Touma to countless realities and worlds, each designed to break his spirit, with everyone acting as their own unique version of hell. In many of them, he experienced horrendous physical pain, including his body decomposing while still alive, and another one where his flesh was distributed and eaten by cannibals, with Office changing the phase billions of times so she would not lose Imagine Breaker. Touma's mentality now began to crack as the concept of time lost all meaning. His heart had been torn to pieces, but miraculously, he had not lost his sanity yet, as it would take one more world for him to truly break. Touma then awoke to the Omega phase, with him now sitting on a bench in a very normal park, and everything seemed peaceful. But soon he realized this world was far from what was ordinary. He saw his former enemy, Sherry Cromwell, smiling with a boy she called Ellis. But wait, didn't Ellis die many years ago? What was going on? Agnese Sanctis, the orphan, was sitting with her parents. Vento of the Front was with her brother, who had previously died in a tragic accident. Kumakawa Maria was now with her teacher, Kihara Kagan, who had recently been killed and turned into an Einherjar, a Norse zombie. Yet he was still alive and well. What was this place? Was it heaven? Possibly. It was a reality created by Office, where she gave happiness to all and saved everyone, giving them the perfect ending they desired. There was just one exception, and that was Touma himself. This was a world where Kamijou Touma did not exist. Office had saved the entirety of mankind with a simple wave of her lance, and the population did not even need Touma for it. This made him question, what had he been doing this entire time, saving as many people as he could? He was not a god, and could never live up to the standards Office had set. He saw Accelerator, the Esper who murdered 10,000 clones of Misaka, now walking beside her as friends instead of bitter enemies, living peacefully with the other clones who never died in this reality. And then a soccer football rolled up next to him. He saw Index with Style and Kanzaki, the former friends of Index, who she had forgotten due to her memories being wiped by the church. And yet that sad event never occurred in this world, with them now playing together. Index asked Touma, "What's wrong? Does your stomach hurt?" Touma was holding back his tears. "No, it's nothing. I'm fine." She then left with her friends. Since Touma was never supposed to exist in this universe, Office states that Touma's very existence here is a threat to the happiness of the 6 billion people on Earth. She tells him, "Bring an end to your life. There is no other way to protect this world." No doubt, this was all just psychological manipulation by Office, but Touma couldn't help but listen to her words as he despaired. Before his eyes, a noose dropped from the sky, including many weapons, as Office was supplying whatever method he desired to end his life. He wanted to return to his original world, but by doing that, he would trample on the perfect utopia before him. Touma passed many others on his final path, happy, living their ideal lives, as he suffered the most inside. He saw Index once again, who ran straight past him without looking, treating him as nothing more than a stranger, despite the fact, in Touma's world, she loved him more than anything. Touma found the ideal location to end his life. He had arrived at the roof of his student dorm building, or what should have been his dorm building, and he made the final decision to jump. But suddenly, he heard a voice shout at him from behind. It was a clone of Misaka, but not any ordinary clone. The girl was being controlled by the will of the entire Misaka network, the collective thought entity of all the clones, both dead and alive. Due to the network spanning both life and death, the will managed to retain her memories of Toma's world and even recognize who he was. And due to being in a strange state that is between life and death, she is free from the control of even Office herself. The will then sat with Toma in his dorm room and gave him the therapy session he so desperately needed. She told him that Office had cheated to create this ideal universe, and how could it be perfect when it has blatant cracks in it with the existence of both Toma and herself, and the fact all these people were living their best lives, but they had no idea or understanding of the original world. If they remembered, then perhaps some of them may have rejected this artificial happiness where Office treated them as nothing more than dolls. Surely this fake reality isn't as valuable as the authentic world that Toma was familiar with. He then vented as Toma let all his emotions out to Will as he cried, saying, "It bothers me." Office bothers him. All Toma wanted was to live a normal life. However, he always prioritized others instead of himself. He did not want to destroy the happiness of others, and yet he could not stand what Office had done to the world. Will asked him why he placed himself below everyone else. Despite having the biggest savior complex known to man, Toma never bothered to save himself. He decided he would apologize to everyone who had no idea about this paradise, if he ever returned back home, that is. As Toma left the room, the will gave a hopeful smile and said she would see him in the next world. Toma then, with all his willpower, chose to reject the utopia, or perhaps it is more fitting to call it a dystopia. Against the odds, he would stand up to a god, despite being only a human. Even if he could not bring back his world, he would attempt to defeat Office, even if that meant destroying the happiness of 6 billion people because of his own selfish desire. Toma truly evolved as a character during this arc. We saw him at his most vulnerable and at his bravest. His attempted suicide and his conversation with the will remains one of the most heartfelt and impactful moments in the entire franchise, and it's one of the many reasons why NT9 is a fan favorite volume of Index, and arguably the greatest story in the franchise as a whole. Happy 10th anniversary to New Testament Volume 9. Thank you, Kamachi Kazuma, for inspiring so many readers with this beautiful masterpiece, which will live forever. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe and check out my other videos about the Office arc here for more content just like this.